You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. This episode of ProdCast is brought to you by MSCRMaddons.com. With focus on productivity and usability, MSCRMaddons.com is a leading provider of high-quality add-on solutions for Dynamics 365. Whether it's the need for professional documents generated and processed on a single click, keeping your storage costs under control by moving documents to SharePoint or Azure Blob, or simplifying your users' daily tasks by improved navigation and activity handling, MSCRMaddons.com add-ons will help you drive efficiency and user experience. We thank MSCRMaddons.com for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. Welcome to ProdCast. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Joel, I'm doing really well. The Minnesota winter is just what you'd expect it to be, and I embrace that fully.
Oh, great. I just got back from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so I know what you're talking about. Although Minnesota is a little bit more than Iowa. I don't know. Depends on where you are. Anyway, so what do you ever do if you have, say, somebody, maybe your boss or a colleague, that you're depending on them for something, but sometimes you ask them and they don't get to it or don't respond for 2 weeks? Is there any ways you found to make that more productive?
Just badger them a lot. Is that what you're looking for?
Set up the flow to email them once an hour. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No. One of the things that I learned really early in my career, especially if it's a manager, is my job as an employee is to make sure I'm not making their life more complicated.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things in there that I think we can poke at. And one of them is, anytime that I am, working on something where I need to get either some sort of approval or feedback, or I'm trying to solicit some different ideas, something that I really try to pay attention to is, as I bring up the conversation, what is the default action going to be? So
okay.
when I say that, are you familiar with that concept, or should we chat about it a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I don't really think we talked about this on ProdCast before.
Yeah, so I mean, and this is the phrasing that I use around it, so which is why I didn't get this from a specific book necessarily, but the default action is like, okay, we're on this path. Time is always going to be moving. And one of the biggest constrained resources that we have is going to be time. Right. So over time, as you're working on a project, there are going to be different milestones and deadlines. And if no action is taken, then by just the sheer nature of what it is, whatever happens to have happened then is the default action. So, like, if nobody takes any specific action, what is the outcome of that going to be? So,
okay.
And why I pay attention to this is for these group projects or working with a manager leader, trying to come up with the whatever the next steps are going to be or the type of feedback that I'm soliciting. I very much keep that default action in mind where, hey, on their side of it, this probably isn't going to be the number one thing on their list is to, review this document or look at this email or punch up these notes or give me feedback on something. They have a million different things that are competing for their time. So, one thing we've talked about is trying to be concise and specifically what you're asking for. But the other side of that is, if they don't take action, have I set this up in a way where I'm not going to be blocked? Because the default action could be, I'm not, if I send something out and I say, hey, I want to get your feedback, or I need your feedback on this before I can send it out to the customer. Well, what I've just done is I built in a dependency to the default action. The default action is, I'm not going to be sending anything out unless that other person does something. Which, maybe that's what I want. Maybe the default action I want is to not actually send this note. But if I do actually want to send this out, I can kind of take that same concept and rephrase it in a way where the default action is that it goes out. And for that one, it's going to be, hey, I've put this draft together. I'll be, reviewing it and making it final. Want to get your input before I send it next Thursday. There, the default action becomes, this thing is going to get sent next Thursday, whether you take action or not. And depending on how big of a pain in the butt that I actually want to be, or how important it is to get their feedback on this, I may have that reminder that goes out, every day or every couple of days, or I'm checking in with them on whatever schedule is reasonable for kind of the gravity associated with that project, with that deliverable, with whatever that thing is going to be. But that way, when we actually get to next Thursday, I am getting the outcome that I want, which is either I'm going to send this thing or I'm not going to send this thing. Does that make sense as I kind of go through that?
Yes. I like that approach a lot because it keeps a level of control in your hands rather than be at the whims of somebody else who this may or may not be a priority for. And so I'll use that, for example, we've had podcast guests that say, can I listen to it before you publish it? So instead of saying, hey, can you listen to this and get back to me? And then, hey, have you listened to it yet? I'll tell them, we're going to publish this on next Tuesday. Listen to it and get back to me before next Monday if there's anything you want to change, or something like that. Or also, if it's a certain type of where it's not necessarily an official approval process, but it's I want to get my boss or somebody to review something before it goes to the client, but it's time sensitive. Yeah, I've used that before. I will say it really the whether or not you can use this approach really depends on the type of request and the severity, I would think, because there's a certain level of severity that if this doesn't get approved by the chief legal counsel, you could get fired. You don't want to take the approach with that.
Yep. And I mean, that's absolutely an important consideration there. But what I will also say is having an awareness of that may influence the default action you're looking for. So let's use that case where it has to go through that chief legal counsel. What I will do as I'm considering what that timeline is going to look and what that default action is going to look like is that, assuming I have direct access to that chief legal counsel, I will tie the action that I'm looking for from them that is a required milestone that I have to go through. I will tie that to something that is not in that person's control, but is something that they are going to respect. So if it's that, chief legal counsel, maybe it's something that the, general manager of a specific division has a deadline where they're going to be needing to take a specific action. And this is just one of the many pieces that are going to be coming together. I will make sure it's framed up in a way and I give enough runway so that if that chief legal counsel isn't doing their piece by the time that I have set, the default action is I have an escalation that's getting built into that, and the default action is to escalate to that other person who might be able to swing a heavier stick than I can to be able to make them actually do that thing. Considering the default action, because I've when I was working in sales operations, I did a lot with like contracts, and we had a legal team, and I was junior in my career when I first started working with them, and it took some work to figure out how to kind of frame up what it was that I needed, set an appropriate timeline to that, and make sure that there was an awareness of, if they don't just meet the deadline that I'm looking for, here's what the kind of next step or outcome is going to be, whether they like it or not. It's not personal. It's just the way it's going to be because this is the timeline we're having to keep. Okay.
So what do you do in those cases where you've got, say, the approval needed by the chief legal counsel, and the process takes a couple days? how do you keep that top of mind? How do you remember those things that your part is done, but you're just waiting for this next step to happen before the next step can happen? Do you create a task on your task list and just leave it sitting there reminding you, or do you have other ways of kind of reminding yourself about those things, so the things that are urgent in the moment don't push out the things that are important but require somebody else to do something?
Yeah, so for this situation, it's going to show up in two places for me. One is I probably have a task that's already being tracked in a task list around whatever the bigger picture project is. So getting that legal counsel's approval is one step in that overall project or task that I'm tracking there. So that's one of the places. But the other one is going to be if I've sent something out through email specifically, and this will be a callback to earlier ProdCast where I talked about using categories and search folders inside of Outlook. So for that sent email that I've sent to that legal counsel, I would apply the category of waiting to that note. And in doing so, when I go to my search folder called waiting, I can see what are all the items where I've done my piece on this, but I'm waiting for somebody else's response or someone else's action on this thing that I'm doing. And I make a habit of going through those search folders, specifically the waiting folder, so I can send those tickler reminders out to people. If they need another reminder from me, or there's another key search folder that I have, which is called, active, which are those things where it's on my shoulders and I need to do something, but I just didn't have time to do it right then. But those are the two places that would show up for me.
Yeah, I used to do something like that, but then I would forget to check that folder. So what I've been doing now is using my boomerang tool and saying, bring this back to my inbox at this date and time. And so what happens then is it comes back to my inbox. Say something's supposed to happen Thursday afternoon, I'll have it come back to my inbox on Thursday morning, so I'm reminded of it, and then I can follow up on that if it hasn't been done yet. But so talking about kind of the power dynamic, where you've got, we talked about if it's the chief legal counsel, you could lose your job if you don't get them to review it. But if it's somebody who's more of a peer or somebody who has really no power over you, then I've actually gone super assumptive with this. And for example, I want the account manager to review an estimate before I send it to a client, but I know that they're not very organized, and I think it's pretty close to what that they'll be okay with it. I'll schedule it to go out, like tomorrow morning, and say at 8 o'clock, and say this email's going out at 8 o'clock. If you'd like to review it beforehand, here it is. And that way, it's totally on cruise control, because if they get back to me, I can go in and change it and stop it. But if they don't, I don't have to think about going back in there and doing it.
Yeah, no, that's a great use for that. I don't do that. I wish I had that habit though.
Yeah. So that's good. So let's all be assumptive. If anybody has any requests of Matthew, give him a firm deadline, and then take the default action. I like that. Make the default. So if you're thinking if then statement, the then would be the default action, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the default action would technically be the else, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I guess so. You're right. So one thing I have, I don't know if I brought this up, but towards the end of the year, I changed something pretty significant about the way that I do my emails. And if you remember, as opposed to using smart folders, I used real folders and would move my email there. But, I found that was not really conducive, especially since I moved to Outlook mobile rather than like iOS mobile or Gmail or anything else. I'm using Outlook mobile, and that does not make it very conducive to automatically move things to folders. So what I've done is I've adopted archiving, and so Outlook mobile and Outlook on the desktop have the archive button, and I am now in things I need to keep around but I can't delete. but I don't need to act on, I'm archiving. And then I can still find it with search on the phone and search on there because it stores the archive online. So it's still in my Exchange, but it's not in my active inbox. And rather than keeping all those different folders, and so far it's been actually a lot easier. I can process messages much quicker. And actually, if you select messages in Outlook on the computer and hit the backspace instead of delete, it will move it to the archive.
Oh, I didn't know that one. That's a good shortcut. Yeah. So I'm curious then. Does that mean your inbox looks like inbox 0, or what is that distinction between what stays in your inbox and is kind of front of mind there versus what'll get swiped to the archive and you have to search for?
I think there's 3 actions you can take with an email, really, maybe 4. You can reply to it, you can delete it, or you can file it for later. That's my perspective. So if it's junk mail, I delete it. If it's something, so I'll give you a couple categories. If it's an important document for a client or something that I need to respond to, I will set myself a task and say, respond to this email. And then I generally will keep that generally in my inbox until I do the task. If it's something that I need to keep on for later, such as the HR administrator emails out the 401k information for 2019, or the new benefits information. So the one time I go to the eye doctor, I need to remember who my eye doctor provider is. That's the kind of stuff that I will archive. But then if it's stuff that I don't need to have, I still like to delete that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So that's, so far it's working pretty good, and it's just adapting. I just found that my system of going to folders, which was kind of still a crutch, I think, of, I need to find, if I'm working with Acme Corporation, I need to find the Acme information. I'm trying to track things in Dynamics that are really business important, and things that are short-term actionable, I'm keeping around, and then either long-term stuff. I'm trying not to have like long-term follow-up stuff in my inbox, if that makes sense. If it needs to be something that takes more than 5 minutes to do, I put it on my task list.
Yep, comes a task. Exactly.
So one thing that I don't think we've talked about is the idea of habit bundling. I've read about this in a couple sources, and the idea is to motivate yourself to do the things you need to do but you don't like to do, maybe exercising, maybe eating your vegetables, maybe reading books that are deeper than the current John Grisham thriller, those kinds of things, bundling those with things you like to do. Be it, I'm going to do this while I watch my favorite movie, I'm going to do this in a place I like to go, I'm going to listen to the audiobook while I'm exercising. That's an intriguing concept to me that I've been trying to at the beginning of the year, encourage good habits and healthy stuff. So, have you ever tried that kind of thing to make necessary but unpleasant things more pleasant?
So I don't know that I do it consciously with myself at this point, but I know I definitely do it. I don't think about it that way, but it's definitely a habit I'm trying to drill into my kids at this point. I will habit bundle the weekly chore of going to the grocery store with my daughter, who's now almost 3, and she gets really excited about going to the grocery store each week. And I don't think it's because of the grocery store itself. It's because every week before we do that, we stop at the coffee shop that's right next door to the grocery store. I get a cup of coffee, make out the list. She gets a banana bread that she gets to, eat, and is now practicing how to use a knife and fork, plastic knife and fork. We're safety first, but doing that, and like for her, I'll say, the night before, hey, tomorrow's Saturday. Where are we gonna go? She says, the grocery store. I'm like, that's right, the grocery store. But first, the coffee shop. That's right, but first the coffee shop. So there's our bundling for the almost 3-year-old.
Yeah. So I think I think a lot of the tasks that fall into this category with me are things that don't require a lot of mental energy, but just are kind of tedious stuff. There's certain work-related things that are just kind of admin type stuff that aren't fun and don't have. It's things that don't have an immediate positive feedback from. Brushing your teeth, for example. It's important to do because you only have the one set of teeth, but it's not necessarily my favorite thing to do. Yeah. So that's where, finding something, especially if it's something that needs a lot of mental attention, you don't want to do this. But if there's some, kind of admin work, it's okay to do that while you're watching TV or something. Yeah. Something that you can kind of shut your brain off and just focus enough to get this done and push through it while doing something you find more enjoyable.
Yeah. And I'll say that for me, definitely I'll do that with things like, washing dishes and that kind of thing. Because right. I am very prone to let those just kind of stack up. But what I will do is I'll just like throw on the headphones with a podcast and by the time I'm done doing the dishes, I kind of forgot about the fact that of how long it took or the effort that was going in there.
Just don't drop your phone in the sink.
That's the nice thing about the Bluetooth headset is no wires. Phone is safely in my pocket.
Unless the headset falls in the water.
I got a cheapy skull candy one just for doing that, and actually, so I have one of those really nice like Bose, quiet comfort noise canceling earbuds. That I use on planes and when I really need to focus in. But in Minnesota winters, when I go out and walk the dog, I don't want to kind of put the wires that are going to be exposed to the cold like through that every day, or putting earmuffs or hat on top of the earbuds that way. So I got this. Gosh, I think they were like $35 or something like that. Just a skull candy, Target special Bluetooth headset that has pretty dang good battery life, decent enough audio quality. I learned about them on Wirecutter, and like if something happens to them, it's not the end of the world. Like if they got wet, if my son, my 6-month-old, like grabs at them and starts pulling on them, I'm not immediately horrified that like these expensive Bose headphones are getting ruined. It's like, no, I don't care as much about these. They're a little more disposable.
Right. One of my Christmas present this year from my family was a true wireless headphones from Jabra, and I didn't want the Apple iPod or AirPods because they looked like grandma earrings. So these do not look like grandma earrings. I mean, now, you think about it, they look like the earrings your grandma wore. So Sean Tabor, Scott LaFonte, Stephen Smith, all those people with those AirPods, they look like they're wearing grandma earrings.
They do. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you are so true. They are
Next time you're going to see all the people with grandma earrings, and you're going to laugh. All right, so let's bundle our habits. So listening to podcasts like this one while you do unpleasant tasks is a good thing to make your unpleasant tasks more pleasant. And remember to set the default outcome to the one you want and stack the deck in your favor.
That's right.
All right, stay productive, Matthew.
You too, Joel.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. Follow Matthew on Twitter at @MCAnderson or on his blog, connectingthedata.com. Follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. ProdCast and the rest of the CRM Audio Network are available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and anywhere else fine podcasts are available. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.